Don't make a first impression or lasting impression without it. Don't trade law school for life school without it. Don't turn your house into a home without it. Don't share a moment while sharing a moment without it. Don't go abroad. Go live. Or go just a little out of your comfort zone without it. Don't change the game. Or even change the world without it. And don't watch her dance like nobody's watching without it. Whatever you do, don't forget that the more you live forward, the more you need someone at your back. The powerful backing of American Express. Don't live life without it.
Good evening, everyone. It's lovely to see all the very familiar faces once again at the BMICH, and we are happy to regroup here and pretty encouraged to see all of you here. It's been a very challenging month. So, as you know, we declared Sri Lanka Leopard Day in 2021 with the original concept conceptualized by Sriyan, who was the president in 2020 when we had that nasty incident of the black leopard. Before we start, let me quickly introduce our moderator. He will then take on the proceedings from there. Sriyan is our immediate past, he was a past president a couple of years back. He shouldered a huge responsibility of seeing the society through the 125th year with a lot of external conflicts and events we had. He's a former chairman of ETF and also the former managing director of HEMA's Consumers. He likes to consider himself a conservation administrator now, and he heads the WNPS, the latest venture, which is the plant. Sriyan, over to you to take over the proceedings. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Spencer. And yeah, he's the immediate past president. He forgot that. So, welcome everyone. I know there are a number of people online. Welcome all of you wherever you are in the world, and nice to be back here. Exciting topic, hot topic. Let me do the few formalities that I usually do before I take on my moderator role and hat. So, thanks to NTB, who actually have been supporting us quite a bit with our monthly lectures. Nations Trust Bank, they support us on Lores, Varna, Varnam, the Jungle Telegraph. So they've been a great partner to work with, and that partnership has been going on for years and helping us to take this journey from strength to strength. Many of you, if you are interested in some of these past publications, they're all online, as you know, right? We also have our expanding number of partners, but essentially, let's look at the list here. So we have a couple of banks. Hold on, today I'm juggling a couple of things. Right, so we have Nations Trust Bank, as I said, LOLC, NDB Bank, Sampath Bank, Mercantile Investment, Mr. Ajita Di Costa, JK Office Automation, Sparsilon, who's been doing a lot of work with us, Colombo Jewelry Stores. They played a lead role in the recent elephant happenings that we had, Abans and LG with Green Nile, all of that. Kumarika and Hema's Consumer Brands, very involved with one of our biggest projects, Ani Vilundava and Mo, Haley's Advantage. Lanka Environmental Foundation, Dilma, you can grab your tea today, as usual, Ceylon Bank. And as some of you know, we've been also starting to build up our engagements internationally, and our partners now include the US Forest Service, Rainforest Trust International, and Resolve, the Quick Response Fund. They are the partners who funded us for the land acquisitions that we recently did on plant. So we can talk more about that later on. And finally, thanks to our creative partners, CJ and the team for Sarva, who help us very well on many things. So I think some of you would have read around the work we are doing on plant, which is one of our newer initiatives. And hopefully, we are on a journey of building private conservation, and the notion of saying that, all of us are co-parties in conservation and not just government and the restricted, limited amount of lands that we have, and, how do we build forest corridors. So there's some very exciting work going on, and we would like to see more partners involved in that. A lot of science behind the work there. And right now we have some 200 odd acres under our purview, and the number of partners and work we do is expanding. So very exciting. Youth Wing, I think they just finished some of the training work in and around the Anivilundav area, and I think they are all over the country spreading their wings. Great to see the young people moving faster and faster, and hopefully taking over from us old folks, right? We're always keen to have new members join us, so download the forms, get on with it. And little bits of fall back, and we can see some members trickling into our bungalows, but please do patronize both the Yal and the Udawalawe bungalows. And our social media sites are always updated for the work we do. So let me end that side of my formalities and switch hats to a moderator part. And I have a well-known, distinguished panel here. So let me do a bit of honors with some brief introductions. All of you have seen their bios, but Professor Inoka, the one and only, lady on the panel, so you can't mistake that, but she's a professor in conservation biology, Sabaragam University, where she spends her knowledge sharing days, but she co-founded the Tropical Ecosystem Research Network. She's our co-chair of the Wildcat Subcommittee, and she's also really a fantastic person to be around. So it's always exciting when you're around Inoka. There's a lot of energy, bubbliness, and exciting insight that she always brings. On my right, Rukshan, founder trustee of the Leopard Trust, and of course chairman of the Wilderness and Protections Area Foundation. He's a former director of EFL, and of course many of you will know him as our past president as well. He's had a lifelong passion for wildlife. He's been very interested in the evolution and adaptive radiation of species. Very keen, and has done a lot of work on the long-term conservation of leopards and all the biodiversity related issues. So he's kind of a mix of science and conservation, and of course, as many of you know, photography at heart as well. So Rukshan brings a mix of skills into the work he does, and we're glad to have Rukshan on the stage today. Thank you, Rukshan, for joining. And finally, on my right, Kitsiri Gunawardana, our left rather. Kitsiri is not very visible, so he's doing a lot of work, but I think we need to pull him into the forefront a lot more. But for those of you who know the impact that Kitsiri has made, I think, the amount of tremendous knowledge building work done since the war in all around Vilpattu, Kitsiri has done a ton of work there. He's a renowned ornithologist in his own right. His love for Vilpattu extends beyond the more popular species. So if you've been following some of his updates, pictures, etc., forget the butterflies, which I know he loves, but you're just talking to me around how he spends a couple of hours observing the dung beetles. So, there's a lot to learn from any observation, but today Kitsiri is here because there's a lot of work he's done on the leopards in and around that region from 2012, and that information gathering continues to this day. So I'm very excited to have Kitsiri also join us. So that's the panel for today, and you're going to have to put up with us for the next maybe hour or so, and then we'll have some questions from you. Right, here we go. So some background when we start, right? I've been doing all the, Kitsiri was very happy that he didn't have to present because I had to do all the homework. But so I spent a couple of days reading all the different articles because Spencer and his team have done an amazing job at projecting and talking about the leopard, building the WNPS brand, but also using Leopard Day to get a number of messagings out. So what I don't want to do is come here and have a repeat of those articles. So we'll send you all the links, some of them are on the website. You want to read all that stuff, please get online and do that. So I'm going to kind of shift the conversations a little bit beyond that today. I would have loved to have Dr. Sriyani here, for any of you who are wondering. She's far away in Australia today, very much with us in heart, and we all owe her a debt of gratitude. We also have our biggest partner in conservation, DWC. Not that they are missing from the panel, but next month we are going to have DWC here, and we are going to talk about all the work DWC does, so in case you're wondering. And of course, the last one missing today, Jehan. I'll tell you where Jehan is later on during the discussion, our president, right? So a couple of things. For all of you who have come here, you get a gift, right? Not really, but there's a nice map of Wilpattu out there, which you can pick up for free, right? That's done by Friends of Wilpattu, and with love and gratitude and thanks to our former friend and colleague Nigel and that entire team, right? So this has been a labor of love. It's out there. And so we bought a whole bunch and kept it out here for any of you who'd like to pick up 1 or 2 maps of Wilpattu, so that next time you're in the park, you can use that as you go out. For the panelists, I'm going to put a cap of around maybe 90 seconds for your answers, so that we don't have a lecture, but we have a discussion, so we're going to keep it tight, and I'm going to try to keep them busy. So we'll warm up a little bit slow, right? So leopards, endemic subspecies, one of only 2. I think the other one is from Java, and island species, and taking about 20-25% of our land mass. But now, what's happening to the leopard? Every time you ask someone, how many leopards? 800 to about 1,000, Is this going up and down? And some people are very upset that it's going up or down, depending on who you ask. So I'm going to start off with 2 easy questions. So the first one, I think I'll ask Rukshan and Inoka. Are the leopard numbers going up or down? What's going on?
Well, there is no easy way to tell that.
Here we go. Rukshan, a bit loud, I think.
Yeah, because unless you have an idea of how many, unless you have an idea of some data from all ecosystems in the country and all kinds of land use, it's not possible to predict trends. And asking the question whether leopards are going up or down is asking to predict a trend. So if you're data deficient, how do you predict a trend within that data deficient set?
Great. Inoka, thoughts from you on that question?
Yeah, I think what Rukshan said is correct. Without any scientific work, whether the number that you mentioned, 800 to 1,000, came from a previous work, but now we need to sort of cover all the ecosystems, and this concept of leopards are increasing actually comes from the visibility. We are seeing them more and more outside now. They are coming out to human habitats, 1. 2, we are clearing areas for agriculture, encroaching, so we are making leopards come out. And also there are a lot of people who are interested in leopards now. So you have your cameras, your social media, everything is saying, oh, we saw a leopard here, leopard there. So it seems that you are seeing more of them. But that does not indicate whether they are going up or down. You can't tell that just offhand without doing a proper scientific study, which I think we'll come to that eventually, which we are trying to do.
Good. So we'll talk about some of that, but I'm just starting to set the stage, getting warmed up. I think it was Eisenberg in '89 or something who started talking about this top carnivore, and this word Keystone Species started getting used. So now we have the leopard moving between endangered and vulnerable, and all of that. But Inoka, why should we conserve the leopards? What's this big buzz around conserving leopards in Sri Lanka?
Well, every animal is important when it comes to the integrated ecosystems. But if you take leopard, I'll give you 2 straightforward answers: the value and the threat. The value in terms of ecological value, which we are forgetting all the time, and the economical value, right? So this value places the leopard in a position where we need sort of intense conservation measures. The word that you use, keystone species. Now leopard is the top carnivore, the apex predator of this country. We don't have that many. So being the apex predator, it can control the food webs, the food chains. It has a big say. So in that case, it becomes a keystone, something that holds the ecosystem together. You take it off, and the system will collapse. That's what the theory says. System will collapse. So it's a keystone. It's an umbrella species, because when you protect the leopard, I think eventually we'll come to that too later. When you protect the leopard, the habitat automatically, you provide protection, conservation, habitat for other species. So charismatic. So that's the value, ecologically, economically. Tourism-wise, I think WNPS has been circulating some flyers about the economically important. And then the threat. An animal might be valuable, but then if it's not threatened, you can just leave it in peace, right? But why we need to go behind it and take care of it is because of what we are doing. We are endangering the animals. You go and correct what you did. So the value and the threat, those are the reasons why we have to conserve the animal, very simply.
Good. So, Rukshan, maybe you can share a little bit around, you've been working with Dr. Sriyani fairly closely, and, just share a few thoughts of her line of thinking on this whole issue around, why conserve leopards?
Well, she says that unless you have more data on the status of the leopard in the country, real conservation action is not possible. She also believes that conservation should not be activity-based, it should be results-based. So that being the case, the first thing that needs to be done in a comprehensive manner is have sufficient data to predict trends or to understand trends, whether there is decline or increase. Also, what mitigatory measures need to be taken, and it has to be ecosystem based, and she acknowledges that different ecosystems, different land use patterns have different densities, and I think fundamental to everything is a presence-absence survey, and then more data that fills in the gaps. So first, she says the science, and when the science is, I suppose, more or less complete, then the rest can follow. So otherwise, conservation, I mean, long ago, I wrote a sentence saying that unless there is proper research findings and science, conservation is blind. We are just like, groping in the dark.
Maybe not. Add some spice to this.
Speaking of Dr. Mitrapala, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What made you come up with the Leopard Day, WNPS?
Yeah, so the Leopard Day, so what really happened was that, as all of you know, we caught the black leopard on the camera traps, and, everybody fell in love with those images, and, you had a part to play, I think, in some of that. And so then it was heartbreaking when the leopard, got caught in the trap and the snare, and, that whole episode in May. So I think we were grappling with, we were upset, angry, annoyed, all kinds of emotions, and that day we were grappling with what kind of response we want to create for this, and we were discussing the kind of recommendations we want to make, and the kind of articles we want to come up with, and the statements we want to make. And pretty much went to sleep with that problem. We'd been spending the whole evening discussing that, and it's one of these things that you go to bed at night and, kind of wake up in the morning and, you kind of have some little bit of a breakthrough idea. So it was something like that I, woke up in the morning and felt, having something a day like this would kind of help us to kind of talk about it, periodically in a meaningful manner. Like Rukshan says and Dr. says, not that it should be just a symbol. So then when we started discussions with DWC around it, they were open to the idea, but the question was, what day? And for us, do you remember a dark moment or something different? That was not a problem as such. What we were more interested in is messaging about the leopard and the work we wanted to do. And, collectively everybody felt, the day that we now have is probably a great day to, use as a symbol, and we all felt the same. And so I think we have a great outcome, and people like Spence are doing a great job in telling the story, and this year I've seen a lot more people start to echo the challenge. So I think I'm very excited, but you spoke of valuing the leopards, and I've seen some numbers, I must confess, the science behind the numbers of what's the value to a leopard is, I would say, questionable. And I could probably, discuss and argue on that quite a lot. But I have a bigger question. So you put a number on a leopard and say a leopard in Yala is worth X. So for me, that would mean that the leopard in Hatton is worth Y. And, it kind of ends up being almost like that leopard is worth nothing, this leopard is worth a lot of money, right? And almost defeats the purpose. Because if you focus a conversation on one area and say that's the value of a leopard, what about the leopards in the other area? So you have this question, and we all know that, that the broader question should be around ecosystems, and actually it's moving more to landscape management also now. So, Kitsiri, how should we talk about this? Give us some thoughts on, a better way to go about narrating why we should fall in love and protect leopards.
Well, primarily, I think, as Professor Inoka mentioned and Rukshan mentioned, there are
closer to the mic. Yeah.
There are few reasons when you take from an ecosystem perspective of the importance of the leopard. And I don't think we still have enough data and the kind of research to sort of be able to understand, if you suddenly take out the leopard from a particular habitat, what impact that's going to have on the other animals. Let's hope that we don't have to find that out, and at least in the areas that the leopard is found, we can continue. Second reason, of course, as we all understood, was from a tourism perspective. That's an attraction that is that cannot be counted down. I mean, everybody who goes to a national park wants to get a glimpse of a leopard, and many of the shutterbugs would, before they come out of the park, they want to have it, posted on Facebook. So that's the kind of attraction and the value. But for me, personally, the reason as to why a leopard should be conserved is that it's an absolutely a unique animal, and it brings about a sense of fascination to your walk in the park or to the other animals, and for hundreds of thousands of years this whole systems and relationships and all these things have evolved. So yes, monetarily, if you are to convince the politicians, if you are to convince, let's say, the Ministry of Finance as to why certain amount of resources should be allocated, certain amount of land should be allocated for the protection of leopard, perhaps you can come up with some numbers and say that, look, these are the kind of money the hotels make, these are the kind of money the park makes, they all come to see the leopard, so this is the value of a leopard. But I would argue that there's far greater value in preserving a species, a keystone species like the leopard, like, for example, the sloth bear or the elephant, to managing that whole ecosystem and that habitat, because they are a key part of that whole system. So you take out that species, it can be doomsday. It's like taking nuts and bolts off a vehicle. At a particular point, the whole thing will fall down.
Kitsri, I'm going to stay with you. I mean, I appreciate the love. We all love the leopard, let's face it. But you're in love with the leopard, no problem. But, there have been one or two attacks by leopards, right? So Sri Lanka has had limited history in the distant, many years ago, 1-2 cases which are documented. Thankfully, not too many. Recently, we had a little bit of spike because of an incident in Kumana. And then, of course, a few days ago, we had, one in your living room pretty much, which many of you would have caught on TV. So let's talk a little bit about that. What are we going to expect in the coming years? Do you think the people in and around those areas have the same love for this animal who's, can be such a life-threatening force around them. What do you think will start playing out as we keep pushing the borders in this manner? And yes, the leopards are coming out, but they're not coming out of choice or love for, appreciation for mankind the way we seem to appreciate them. We want them to come out so that we can appreciate them, but there is a cost that they're paying for coming out. So what should we expect in the coming, let's say, decade? And I'm going to ask Rukshan the same also.
Well, I believe as with all species, including you and I, leopards are also interested in two main things in life: food and sex. So that's the reason as to why a leopard would want to venture out of a given habitat. On a positive note, as we all know, leopard is absolutely an adaptable animal. The leopards that my personal experience that leopards that live in the core of Vilpattu, inside the national park, they would walk about diagonally. You would see them, their activity is quite in the open. Just as much, there are leopards that live in the agricultural areas, there are leopards in the sugarcane plantations, and so on. And they become extremely secretive and nocturnal. So their adaptability is something that's going to help them. One of the reasons, subject to, of course, what Rukshan and Dr. Inoka would have to say, one of the reasons why a leopard would venture out from the protection of a national park is those two reasons that I mentioned. It come of age, it wants to find a mate, and then you start going out. The other and the more compelling reason is that if game is taken out, its prey is taken out, then you are forcing the animal to go out. So in areas like Hunuvilagama and so on in Vilpattu, people historically has been living with the leopard in their chenas, and they actually value the leopard in the chenas because the herbivores are, you wouldn't get too much of herbivores coming into their chenas, and leopard causes no problem for their habitat. So sometimes in the evening when they go to their cycle to their chenas, they see a leopard, there's no issue. And during the day, you'll obviously never see them, and there are people who just see the pug marks and so on. So if you keep on, clearing out the land, their habitat, they will start to move out. And that's because of their hormonal changes. When a leopard reaches about 2 years, the male will venture out. So whether it is inside the forest or outside the forest, so therefore, the smaller the fragmented the forest patch is, you're going to have more interactions. And the issue is going to be with people who have settled in, from outside. Say people who have gone from Colombo or Matara who have never had any interaction with the leopard, suddenly you go and get them living in a border area and you see a leopard, they're all going to get excited and so on. So that, I believe, will be a thing of the future. There'll be more interactions, there'll be more encounters, but education, awareness, and probably understanding the fact that in Sri Lanka, as opposed to Sanjay Gandhi and so on, there won't be, hopefully there will not be many sort of fatalities or attacks.
Okay, Rukshan, maybe 30-second, quick comment on that one. I'll give you a longer question coming up, but any other thoughts on what to expect in the coming decade? Chaos, harmony, disaster?
Well, we hope harmony, but unless mitigatory measures are taken and action follows incidents, incidents will increase. So the thing is, at the moment, it is a situation where there are interactions that between humans and leopards that end badly for the leopard. In the following, events that follow that initial interaction. But if it is properly understood how to disentangle leopards and humans, and how humans can continue to live side by side with leopards with no interaction and no conflict, then I think there is a very good future for the conservation of the leopard.
Cool.
So I can't, in 30 seconds, I can't go into details of how these things can be done, but these things can be done.
Good. Let's shift the focus, shift the lens a bit to photography. right? So these days that seems to be the in thing. There's like, photographers by the hundreds. Every second person has become a photographer. Photography has become more accessible, and you have a lot of people now, showing a lot of passion to get a photograph, particularly of leopards. Now we're talking conservation. So you have a ton of people photographing, but you can't say the same thing about how many people are doing the conservation part. So you have, let's say, 100 people doing photography, maybe 10 people doing research, gathering the data that we were talking about and all of that. And some of that research doesn't translate into conservation either. Sometimes it ends up being research for the sake of research, or the actions are sadly lacking. I mean, I was a little bit disheartened when I started reading as part of my homework. I read all the notes on the 2018 workshop that, many other people in the room were participants of. And, how well are we progressing the actual conservation agenda relative to how fast these issues are getting posed on the leopard? So I think there's, very few or very little, I would say, actually going on in terms of conservation. When I look at the amount of money that is spent on conservation, that's going to be an interesting question. So how much is actually being done on leopard conservation? That's the real question that I am quite worried about. So there's a lot of buzz. Everybody's talking leopard. But tell me who's in the room or on the call actually doing work or contributing actively towards conserving the leopard. So I'm going to throw two questions. Rukshan, the role of photographers, and what would we want from them if this is going to become a meaningful conversation dialogue rather than a Facebook conversation and a bragging rights conversation. And Inoka, the role of researchers, researchers for the sake of research and getting your funding and getting your livelihood versus research which is going to deliver tangible conservation outcomes. So I want two comments on those two things. Tough questions.
Well, photography is actually a tool that can be used for conservation. It is not per se conservation of leopards. Photography also is a way to popularize the leopard, to raise awareness, and get a greater audience outside of the circle of photographers to appreciate and perhaps understand the leopard. But that part, I think, in Sri Lanka is mostly done. What photography can further do is it can be a component of research, but you cannot do research purely based on photography, because photography photography by where you can do photography has a sampling bias. The only type of photography that can give you good, solid data is camera trap photography, because camera trap photography is done on an imposed grid on the landscape, and there is no personal bias, individual researcher bias, or other restrictions. So therefore, I think your question is more about conventional photography. So conventional photography can be a component of research, can be a tool for research, but it has its limitations. Where it is strongest is in popularizing leopards and in raising awareness and appreciation. But there's a downside too. So the downside is photographers can also take things to beyond the limits of, there can be some damage from photography due to the behavior of individual photographers. So I don't want to say much more, but I think you have questions about it.
Yeah, I think that's a point well taken, because there's sometimes you find photographers going to taking steps which ends with conservation, where the photograph is an end in itself, and we've seen that at all kinds of levels, locally and overseas. Inoka, your thoughts on the research? I put in a tough spot because you're a researcher, so you can't let the side down, but I'm going to bet for the other side. Tell me.
It's okay. Short answer, no, we have not done enough. Research-wise, we have not done enough for the conservation. That's a short answer. So we could take it from both ends. Research-wise, if you are doing a research for a species, like go based on a species, that's science. People could say, okay, I'm giving the science, but I am not promising you that I will be sort of translating this into conservation action. You could go and say that, that's fine. But these days, there's more acceptance, even internationally, when you're publishing for work that actually at least tell at the end, this is how it should be used for conservation. That's one thing. My personal belief is that if you are a researcher, you have the best understanding of your work, and you are in a very good position to implement at least some of them, especially for us academics. In universities, we teach students. In a way, we are contributing conservation through the science that we bring in by at least sort of, these fertilizing young minds. But beyond that, there's an opportunity for us to get to the field and do something. So that's one thing. And other thing is what Dr. Mittapala said. She very correctly pointed out that when you are conserving a species, you should know where it is, what is it doing, the movement patterns, right? And whether there's a change in behavior, the change in activities, but all this information could contribute to the actions that you take. So we need to have that science. From the other end, when you are making conservation decisions, you need to have the questions, okay, we need to do this. And for this, we need this kind of data. So from the conservationist end, it could be directed to the universities or researchers and say, okay, we need this kind of information. So there's this mismatch, sort of not enough bridge between the two parties. Sometimes we do research without thinking of the end, thinking of where this information is going. For me, I think it's personally a waste of funding if you're at least not even a little bit contributing to the actual conservation action. From the other point, there should be questions that were directed to these people and tell, hey, go ahead and do this kind of work that could be put into use. And here we have bits and pieces of the puzzle, but we don't have the big picture. So that's a real concern and should be taken up.
Rian, can I come in and ask you a
Yeah,
question?
please.
I mean, I was just listening to Dr. Inoka, so I think there's no doubt about the fact that, yes, research is needed. And of course, to conduct research, there is funding that is needed. WNPS as an apex body, particularly in the recent past, I have seen a lot of activity bringing the people with interest like the shutterbugs, research people together and doing stuff that is actually aimed towards in furtherance of conservation, which I think is a great thing. And as an apex body, as the premier conservation body, what is your future? What is the timelines? I mean, with you, Spencer, Jahan, all you guys being together is going to be a buzzword, and the activity is going to happen. And after you guys are no longer there, is there a continuous sort of plan for the future? Where is it going to go?
Wow, I got put on the spot. Great question. So, yeah, I think, as WNPS, we get a fairly wide view of what's going on. So I can't comment exactly on numbers of what comes in terms of funding for research. But what we can see is that there is far too little conservation action for us to expect a good outcome. We are sitting in dreamland if we think that this outcome is going to be pleasant, simply because of the starting point of what are we doing today collectively, right? So let's face it, the vast amount of conservation which is happening by the DWC, largely. How much of extra work on top of that is coming? It's not enough. It's not enough. So all the parties will need to do a lot more both to support and work with DWC. We will challenge them quite often, but we have to work with them because they are the custodians, whether we like it or not, whether we think they are good, bad or ugly, we will still have to do that part. But then there is a lot more that we can do, and there I think the question is, where's the money? From the view that we have of the money which goes into leopard conservation, it is very, very small. So that quantum of investment is not going to give us the dividend we are looking for. Because the DWC is also under-resourced, and we can cry till the cows come home that they need more money, but we all know how these governments work, and we can say corruption, we can say inefficiency, but that's the animal we are dealing with. So how are we going to step up? I think that's the question. I mean, WNPS does its part. I mean, recently you saw the leopard in the backyard, or at least in the, in the house. We went up 2 days later and replaced everything which was damaged of that household. We funded all their, the electric ware, the furniture, everything, and bought them an entire new get-up, right? I told you, I'll tell you where Jehan is today. He's right now in the Agrapatna estates with the teams. They've been in Dayagama West, East Sandringham. Right now they are doing workshops for all the people on the estates. With it's a funding project with Rainforest Alliance and Unilever, training people in those areas how to deal with leopards. We've been funding. You saw the cage that took the leopard out. Do you know how few cages that DWC has? So we've been raising funds for cages. I mean, last week we gave wire cutters. We will scream about, how to bring a leopard down, not knowing that the poor guys don't have the cutters and the equipment. So WNPS is trying to orchestrate collaborative multi-year initiatives. And I think the only thing I can say, Kitsiri, is what is exciting us is there are more and more young people coming. But I must say that we need more and more corporates and individual donors to come in and resource us so that we can create the orchestration needed for these kind of ecosystem-wide changes. So it's going to be a journey, but I hope we can actually, move that journey fast. I'm going to jump on to a slightly controversial question, or at least a tricky one. So earlier you spoke about keystone species and the importance, and I think you kind of take into mind saying, okay, keystone species right at the top, so if you conserve the leopard, everybody else gets looked after, right? But this leopard is in our country very adaptive, and it can live in damaged and mixed environments almost as well as its unique, original, undisturbed habitat. So, there's a whole bunch of species who will not get protected, but the leopard will box on. So, is it all about keystone species, or is the leopard an end in itself, and will the other, the little creatures that I love snakes, by the way, and they're getting wiped out left, right, and center. How should we look at this?
You can't blame a fellow for trying to survive, right?
Yep.
Okay, so that's the thing. So leopard is a keystone species, but at the beginning I gave few facts, not just keystone, there are other things too. So the term keystone comes from the fact that it's an apex predator and it balances the system. But then the fellow would come out, like it said, perhaps to find mates, or perhaps it might get kicked out by another leopard, the territory taken over, or maybe for food. But when it comes to a new system, you really can't say, okay, now I'm going to kick you out of the keystone status because you are somewhere else. The leopard might be coming to that specific habitat for a resource, that we are not saying that it's going to live there. Even if it's living there, it has a different role to perform. So it wouldn't change anything. If it's in its natural habitat, yes, it would help to sort of other species to survive. By conserving it, you conserve the others. If it comes to a different habitat, the story might change, but still the leopard is the leopard. And the ecological status wouldn't change whether you are in the forest or somewhere else. The role might change, but still, if you are conserving an animal in a forest, that doesn't mean that you are going to conserve the fellow just because it comes out. I guess that's it.
Great. So these forums are useful because unlike newspapers, you can probably say a few more challenging, provocative things. So I'm not going to be too popular on the next one, right? So we talk a lot about this cohabitation, and that's like a buzzword. But now, is that the buzzword for the people in and around Colombo? And is that, the Colombians talking about it, where you'll bump off anything which slithers or, looks a bit of a worry in your garden or in your backyard, and keep it pristine, clean from any creature. And we want a villager to live with death, live with a leopard, and say, please cohabitate, right? Now, we had thanks to Chitral, Shami and I, we had a chance to go and experience the leopards in Jawai. We went to actually study the cohabitation there. Now, that was cohabitation. We watched the people walking up the temple. There are leopards on the rock. People are going to the temple. We missed the leopard. Somebody said, yeah, the leopard is just around the corner here, and they're going. We saw another house. That guy is coming out in the morning shaving just behind his house. The leopard is on the rock, and that's just meters away. And, people were living. We saw many, many examples there. And there the government has said, right, if a leopard takes a calf, within days, they will fund the replacement of that. And the money that they're giving is actually very interesting and useful for the shepherds in that area as well. So, in the absence of any economic benefit transferring from places and people like us and other parts of the country to the people who will need to cohabitate, right? How is this going to work? Some time ago we tried to get an insurance scheme going. Trust me, there weren't too many takers. We tried to get some corporate to say, please help us fund, somebody has a problem with a leopard. Let's, help them out. But so we've seen that the leopard density is increasing in some places. The populations are increasing in some places, or maybe it's the visibility or a mix of both, right? But now, is that going to result in conflict increase? I mean, both the studies, Anjali and the Watsons, and even with their 3 years work, clearly talks of the fact that relocation is not an option. It's a bad option, which actually causes increased conflict. So everybody agrees that relocation is not an option. So now what happens when the leopard, you do better conservation, the leopard population increases, now you start stepping out, like you said, and where will it go? So what do we really want to see as the conservation community? Do we want this number of leopards? Or do we want like 25% more leopards and leopards being all over like the Jawai experience? Or do we want to just sustain this? Or is it that it's just that we want more leopards because people are more photo hungry and they want to kind of tick the boxes saying, I was able to photograph the leopard. So I'd be interested in both Kitsiri and Rukshan's views on what are we really chasing here when we say we want to conserve the leopard. We want to maintain status quo, or we want a status quo minus 10%, let's somehow sustain that for the future, or do we want status quo plus and real cohabitation? Yeah.
Well, I think it's a mix of what you said. Just to give an example, Sriyan, I remember long years ago, we used to get on fishing boats and go and see dolphins in Kalpitia. Every week or so, the fishermen used to kill dolphins and bring and sell to the fish market. Then the tourism industry took off, and then the fishermen realized that, look, if I can take people and show pods of dolphins, I make more money. There are no better conservationists than the people in the area itself who wants to conserve a particular species, because there is economic benefit for that community. I see the same in even around Vilpattu. On dry months like this, in the lake shore of Hunuvilagama, which is the border tank, where on one side people are bathing, and the other side, day before yesterday I counted 189 spotted deer. with 5 elephants coming to drink. And on this side, people get about and so on and so on. So the reason why that is happening is every household in that little village has a jeep, and those guys make money. They have, so that is the kind of balance I believe that we need to bring. Whether we like it or not, we are in a country with a very limited amount of land. When you exclude the national parks, the hilly areas, and so on and so forth, land available for human beings in Sri Lanka is less. So you have to accept it whether we like it or not. So if you don't create a economic solution for people to desire that they need to protect a particular species, because at the end of the day, what the politicians will look for is maximization of votes. And votes will come from people. Leopards don't have votes. So in my view, the way to look at this whole concept would be whether we like it or not. Because I don't think we can take examples of Milford Sounds in New Zealand or some other park in America or Africa, because Sri Lanka is different. Our concerns are different, our land requirements are different, the pressure is different, the political climate and the mannerisms are different. So given those challenges, the important thing is not to articulate the problem and say, look, there's nothing that can be done, but to find a solution, and solutions can be found. If India can do it, we can do it 10 times over. So it's a question of basically, some of the very conventional way of conservation where we say, look, nobody can go in there. I don't think if you are to have leopards, I believe we need to accept the fact that there will be 15 vehicles around that leopard at a given moment. That's a compromise that you're going to have, because those are the people that will create the pressure group for the politicians. Look, this amount of land has to get allocated. There is a cost for the land. Now, if you take Vilpattu, there is about almost 325,000 acres with Mavillaru and so on. For what? So 400,000 of acres you're allocating for, let's say, conservation of species. Now that has a cost to society. So that cost is the income that you're able to make. If you move away from that principle and say that, look, you just do it because see, few of us love leopard, I don't think the future of the leopard is going to be, or leopard, or for that matter, any animal is going to be great. So that's the kind of thinking that I have.
Rukshan, thoughts?
Well, I have very little to add to that. I agree with most of what Sri says, but I think there is something positive also in people's attitudes in Sri Lanka, though we see what makes the news are the incidents where people kill leopards, or leopards are caught in snares or die by other means where human beings have been actually responsible. The fact that leopards have survived this long, this many numbers, whatever that number is, still quite widespread in the island, shows that there is a tolerance for the leopard and perhaps an understanding of how to coexist. It's almost like the people who understand how to live with leopards are the people who call the leopard kotia, and the people who don't understand how to live with leopards, and it's alien, probably a species that is to be feared and little understood, the people who call the leopard divya. So it's almost like we have a name change when a name change wasn't necessary because it got mixed up with some political terminology. We have more people in modern times, in the late 20th century and early 21st, not understanding how to coexist. On the one cardinal thing that I like to add to what is the importance of conserving the leopard, I think it's primarily its ecological role, because once the leopard plays a huge role. It is a apex predator, it is a keystone species, but it also provides ecosystem services. So for the environment, for a healthy environment, the leopard is necessary. Whether we understand it fully or not, the leopard is essential. So from a conservation standpoint, that is the primary reason to conserve the leopard in the landscape. Maybe its economic value is the justification, or it's the sale point with people who don't understand ecology or environment or the importance of all that for human life.
Okay, so there's a question on the chat, so I'm going to jump into that straight away. We're going to shift the conversation to the zoo, also known as Yala. Right, so the question is around Yala and the leopard density and Vilpattu. So I'll come to that. But Yala, I think when the Kittles did their study in Block 1, 2002, I think we had about 22 leopards per 100. And the more recent one, I think that was shown as about 54 or something, the Pattegedra, if I'm not mistaken. So, over a period of time, you're seeing, more leopards in the count. Vilpattu, I think, Dinal says around 18. Now the question would be, I think Dinal and them had done a fairly extensive study, but the question somebody's asking is, should there be a more study done and would Vilpattu have greater density? I'll leave Kitsiri to answer that. That's very much up his street. But let me first keep Rukshan on point with the safari of terror at Yala. Right? So I'm told by my good friend who's in the audience that in the last 1 year we had about 15 leopard cubs in Yala, which is a very nice number, and we all know that the last 2 years most of you haven't been able to terrorize leopards as much with our cameras because the traffic has been far less. So you have the chief mafia, you have the politicians, and you have this big drama around saying limit the numbers. And then within 1 month, the numbers go back higher in terms of how many jeeps can go in. I don't think there's any question of limiting numbers in that manner after you have gone and built capacity for hotels and put up more hotels and so many things in the buffer zones, and you build a jeep capacity for X. Asking the community to now, give up some of that unless somebody is really planning to intervene economically and alter that. It's not going to be easy. So Rukshan, so that puts the pressure on the leopard. So how are you all seeing the leopard behavior getting modified under these conditions? And what's the future for Yala? I'll come to Vilpattu on that side. Yala, lost cause or the beacon of hope for leopards for the future?
Well, I think the pressure does affect leopards and their behavior, and I think the leopards that become habituated, who basically get used to the constant presence of humans and vehicles, can be more successful. And so there is also that adaptation. So the leopards that can adapt to these changing conditions of more and more people within the wilderness that they live will be more successful, and they'll have greater breeding success. They'll go about their daily activities pretty much ignoring what is happening. Everything else, I really have little to add. Everything else you pointed out as to what the problem in Yala is the problem in Yala. And how leopards are going to cope with this in the long term, no one really can tell, because I think you need to do studies, actual research to understand impacts. The only way we get an inkling of what is happening is that during the 2 COVID years, 2021, 2022, pretty much both those years, there was a change in the number of sightings, the behaviors observed, and that shows that leopards that are inhibited in their daily activity when the park is crowded perhaps behave more naturally when the park has very few people. So yeah, well, but that needs to be studied. There is an impact. There is definitely an impact that is adverse.
Kitsiri, thoughts?
One thing going for the leopard in particular is its adaptability. I mean, all of us probably are aware that if you take the Sanjay Gandhi National Park, in just the outskirts of city of Bombay, you find leopards that come out of the park, go hunt dogs, and mice and so on, and then go back and then stay. I mean, they try and sort of survive. So one aspect that I can mention is that I think it's Sriyan, more than anything else, like, I mean, to be very honest with you, I would love to go to Vilpattu on a day there are no other vehicles, because you really experience the jungle and the solitude. But I really don't think going forward, if you take a country like Sri Lanka, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's a necessary evil with which we have to live. If at all, if you don't make these national parks and animals and so on habituated to the tourists, I fail to see how we are able to. So therefore, I don't think there's any point in trying to discuss, taking that aspect away. But having said that, there has to be methodology. You cannot have like 500 jeeps in a particular area, because that becomes, one aspect is that disturbance level is going to be so great that it's going to have a major impact on wildlife. The other aspect is that even from a tourism aspect, nobody's wanting to have an experience of that nature, going into a park. So therefore, India does it, so many other parks does it. So you have to have mechanisms of controlling. But having said that, I think I like to hope, I like to be positive and think that leopards will adapt. As I think Rukshan mentioned, even in Vilpattu, now during the day, you go around, you photograph, you see certain leopards, but when Dinal was doing that camera trap study, you found, I mean, if you take the Mana Road, for example, you will hardly see any leopard when the buses were going about. But in the night, you lay those camera traps, you realize that at 6:30 they come out, and then you could see quite a healthy number of leopards. So they adapt themselves. So that is, so if you have reasonable amounts, what is accepted is that at least if you have about 250 to 300 leopards in a given area, that's a population that can, keep on going on without any. So Vilpattu has that kind of a thing. I'm sure Yala and so many other places also has that kind of this thing. And also in the central areas with the clusters, with the, they go through estates, they go through plantations. So they also have, in that larger sense, such population. So I think it's very important that you take action to preserve it. But I think it's a necessary evil that this human interaction, I don't think is going to become less.
Yeah. Well, I think, you're going to need some sources of funding to actually fuel conservation in the other areas. So if you don't have the Yalas and the Vilpattus, there'll be nothing for, some of this. So I think it's going to be a give and take. I've seen some comments from Anjali on the chat, and, the need for island-wide data and, more researchers involved in that, and possibly, 400-500 mature individuals being maybe the right carrying capacity. Who knows? I think these are all going to depend possibly on another question which somebody's asked, which is what is the outlook for the private areas, the hill country. So it's very unlikely that, we'll probably have new. I know when they started Project Tiger, they declared 6 areas. That's gone up to, I don't know, 20 odd now. So they've been kind of increasing the protected areas and looking at corridors. They moved communities out. They banned cattle grazing. We don't seem to be having that kind of enlightened approach on some of the corridors and things like that. So any thoughts on how, the hill country might play out? Inoka?
The private sector, sorry. You're asking about the involvement of private sector?
No, what might happen in the private lands, the hill country, which doesn't have as much protected spaces? What do we see playing out?
Well, this is where the landowners should come into place when we are thinking of landscape level management. If you think of hill country, most of the time we are not talking about little pieces of land that belong to local people, but we are talking about perhaps agriculture, or even little parcels of land that could be put together by an external party. So for hill country, especially like you said, where you don't have that many protected areas, what you need is a landscape level management. And we have to understand that conservation is not just wildlife departments or forest departments, right? It's everybody's function. And this is where you need better stakeholder engagement. whether it's research or whether it's land management. So hill country is critical when we are thinking about leopard conservation. But it will be critical for the leopard if you don't do the land management properly, which is what we are seeing right now. The encroachment or haphazard sort of extending plantations and even planting the communities in between. You really can't blame the communities, like Rukshan said. If you have a leopard in your backyard and you don't know whether this animal, I mean, for us, we can talk about leopards, we understand. But for a person seeing a large cat probably snarling, it's not a good story. So unless you sort of help these communities to survive in one way or another, then we have, unless you do that, we have no future. So this is something that you really need to sort of pay attention to if you are thinking of conservation outside protected areas. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, in that context, I mean, we joined CITES in 79 or something. I remember reading an article, 82, Delhi, they had one raid or something, and the number of claws equal more leopards than the entire Sri Lanka. So illegal, trafficking and all these things can, be devastating if not curtailed. But if you look at all these things, the first player and a big part is the authorities and DWC and all of that. What is your understanding of kind of all the work they are doing in terms of, what's going on? Because not everyone knows some of the things which are being done. Just share some thoughts.
Okay, I'll generalize the picture first.
Yeah.
Leopard is protected under Fauna and Flora Protection Ordinance. So if we are thinking of conserving these species, there are a few things that you should take into account. Protecting or conserving what is inside protected areas, or taking measures to make sure that you have at least a minimum viable population, a population that can survive. Then you also have to think of enforcing law, enforcing what is given in the ordinance. When it comes to these two, Wildlife Department plays a critical role. That is their mandate or primarily their job when it comes to that. The third thing, I think Rukshan also mentioned this, is people outside protected areas. Here, the Wildlife Department comes in because they are sort of legally responsible for this animal. So what are they doing? Yes, they are managing the protected areas. Right? I'm not going into specific cases. I'm just saying generally, they take care of the protected areas and what's inside. Then they make sure that they have to make sure that there's proper law enforcement. There are questions, of course, I have questions, but generally that should be the case. Awareness development is not necessarily a part of their job, but it happens and it should happen, especially when you are dealing with communities. So this is what Wildlife Department does. I'm sure I'm sort of making it very abstract. Next month when we have a representation of Wildlife Department, this could be elaborated in a better manner. Specific cases, you need proper manpower, you need resources, and you need wits. You need sort of rapid action. If something goes wrong, any of the three factors, you might not get the outcome that you expected, right? I'm just, beating around the bush. That's what has been happening, the things that we criticize. It could be either not having manpower, it could be not being there on time, or it could be some other thing that we don't know, right? So your question, generally, this is what, another thing, inside protected areas, conservation means not just their active work, but even what we do as researchers. We need permission to go into a protected area and work. If a private sector, somebody is getting involved in conservation, we need their permission because all these things should happen under the purview of the Wildlife Department. So this is their role in general.
Yeah, so let me ask Rukshan also to, chip in on what more we could be doing and, how we see some of these challenges. But firstly, a disclaimer on all four of us, because today we are sitting here as a panel. None of us represent the views of WNPS or something like that, which is the, the usual stance we take. So it's a open, vibrant discussion that we have. But having said that, like I said, we partner, challenge each other. Rukshan, thoughts?
Well, taking off from what Professor Inoka just said, the Wildlife Department has a huge role to play. I mean, they are the custodians, and they have protection that they do, however well or badly, is only part of their job. Conservation involves more than that, because conservation is a long-term thing, protection is a day-to-day thing, and conservation of the leopard, for instance, requires the studies, the data, the science, and then based on it, measures that you take to ensure the long-term survival of a minimum viable population, as you mentioned. If you were saying that they have their role as custodians, I mean, they have large tracts of land that they need to be active in to ensure the conservation of species. They may be underfunded, they may be undermanned, and those are real issues. But the part that really kind of actually outrages me is that they use that they are the sole permitter of research in their lands, and even outside of the lands that they have jurisdiction over. And they use that research as like a carrot and stick approach. If you are critical of the department, the hierarchy will see that your research permit is not granted. If you are uncritical when actually the criticism is a fair one, it can be constructive, still that person, if there is a way to punish that person through the wherewithal of the wildlife department's jurisdiction, they will do that. I'm not blaming the rank and file or mid-level staff, but this is the way the hierarchy operates. So this is really unfortunate, because that shuts a lot of mouths that actually should be heard. I'm not talking about social media critique and the dialogue that goes on in social media, but any other means as well.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in there. I guess what you're describing at a broader level happens to all of us as a nation also. Critiques are silenced, and this and that, and so this is, I guess, something that in many spheres you still need to figure out how to navigate, because it's not just, I guess, in this sphere of conservation, but at national level on so many issues, globally, voices are often silenced, suppressed, challenged. So I guess the challenge for us, in a sense, would be how do we work despite that? It's not going to be easy to expect, a perfect, easygoing answer on that. I think that's just, some of the rules that seem to operate in many things. Kilsari, what's your experience?
Very short. My point is that this is a living resource. This is also the resource of the people and unborn generations of Sri Lankans, and they are custodial, and they have a duty, and they are the only representatives of wildlife and wildlife issues when it comes to development or any other activity that takes place in the country. So that is why they are different. And that is why the selection process of who joins the wildlife department also, I think, has to be different.
We can, that's part of a longer debate, but it's no different to, the political hierarchy is also custodian for all the species we have in the country, right? Because they call the shots, end of the day. So we can want what we want, but these are the realities. And I think the question is, what are we going to do? So my bigger challenge to people listening to this is, we can list out all the limitations we have, but are you damn well doing enough despite the limitations or joining only the sideline conversation? Kitsuru, what's your experience on some of this? Because you also had to navigate some of this, and I know, Inoka, you had.
Yeah, no, primarily, I think, Shreyan, it's achieving that balance. I think you made an important point that if you take, for example, the private sector of this country that thrive, that make excellent profits and all these things, just like the wildlife department, they also have to manage all other departments. And believe me when I tell you with experience, it's an uphill task. So the one aspect that I just as an idea that I would want to throw out is that, see, one thing that I see if you take Suranga, who's the warden at Vilpattu, he's doing a much better service than some of the people who were there earlier. But he gets the same pay as the earlier person who sat and did probably much less than him. So I'm looking from the perspective of, if you look at, I come from the private sector, and I know how I can make a group of people, when I'm given a company, to make it efficient. One of the ways in which I do that is to ensure that you become efficient, you make profits, you take home at least 10-15% of that profit. So if we can find, I don't think you can go the whole hog when it comes to the wildlife department, but if you can bring up a mix where the warden and the officers are incentivized for results, incentivized to ensure that the game is protected, incentivized to ensure that the visitors have a better experience, and then part of that profit after the expenses can be their incentive without caps. I really believe that it's the same people who work at, say, John Keel's or any other company, that it's the same graduates that come out of these universities that work in the so-called more efficient institutions as well as the government institutions. So what's the difference? Difference I see is from the perspective of results-oriented action. So if that kind of a concept can be brought about at least on a limited basis, I think you create that passion and the hunger and the kind of desire to be able to suddenly you look at that resource differently, and you will take, for example, the plantation companies, some of the unprofitable plantation companies. You permit them to go ahead and you share, you make them partners. You suddenly those become profitable. So I believe there has to be just to half a second, Shreyan. I believe that, for example, the hospitality sector is totally different. So if there has to be special training given or some speciality given to the hospitality sector of a park, the engineering sector of a park, and the conservation warden, they can have a dotted line. But if you bring in that kind of a sentiment, you suddenly feel that there will be far more interest in granting research, engaging in people and listening to the people. The quality of bungalows, the quality of toilets, all these things probably will start going up because people will start going up and complaining. Yeah. So when a customer walks into my office and complains, I take it seriously because I know my bread and butter depends on that. So I think we need to be, because it's a very, very, very resource. The department is under tremendous pressure from politicians and all kinds of people. They are being crucified each time an elephant goes into a village, and this. So they are also doing, I think, the service under the circumstances. I think they are doing great service. That's my personal opinion. But having said that, you could take them to the next level if at all, if you bring in something of this nature. I think that will probably that is something that is worthwhile testing out.
Okay, Inoka wants a quick input, and then I'm going to shift the...
Yeah. To what you said, give them benefits. At the same time, that's one more thing. When they are doing their services, when they encounter obstacles, help them out. That is also needed. Sometimes they go through certain rough patches. They might need training. They might need backing, legal backing, whatever. If they get that kind of help, because I work with ground level wildlife staff members who do very good job. I personally know that. Where I live at Belihulloya, my next door is wildlife office. So I know what happens. So if that support is also given, I think, together with what you said, they can perform better.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to shift the landscape a little bit now. So let's, you're talking of the hill country, I want to take the conversation up. I saw some interesting photos just before we started coming from where I'm going to talk about. I was at the fortune of having some, so couple of, many years ago I wrote a letter to an incumbent mobile operator, begging them when I heard about it to not provide coverage in the normal manner to Yala, but to provide a technical solution which can have some coverage, some communication ability, but not the regular coverage that we have in the city in the same manner, because it would create a lot of distraction. But of course there were, probably security and other things were the bigger priorities, and environment wasn't that much of a buzzword then, and we've all seen what's happened at Yala. I had the fortune of experiencing leopards quite close, and a very interesting encounter in the 90s, early 90s in Horton Plains. Early 90s. Brilliant. They've been around for a long, long time, right? We heard of euthanasia the other day in Norway, where, when animals get too familiar with humans, that's a problem. We've seen what happens when the elephants start feeding in and around Yala and the Buttala highways and the destruction. Now my question to Kitsiri, what's going to happen in Horton Plains? The one and only area that you can walk around in Sri Lanka, which has a very familiar leopard habitat, and we are starting to get the leopards increasingly familiar with people. I know there are people who are living there morning, noon and night in the audience here, doing a lot of research, and that's very important. My question to Kitsiri, does it need one idiot in Horton Plains to cause and upset the balance which has lasted for a long, long time if the leopards start getting too familiar? What do you think?
No, I think wherever there is interaction, greater interaction, where your leopard space and your space is not respected, where the leopard is able to be left to its own devices, so to speak, the probability of an accident is always the case. It's not only with leopards, whether it's saltwater crocodiles, whether it's elephants, it's the same sort of scenario. But I will answer you with the same example that you mentioned. Look at Javai. Now, Javai, you have people walking about, you have the priests going up, you have all those activity happening. If you take the peak wilderness, you get leopards in peak wilderness, and you have people, walking up and down. So, if the issue is going to be little bit about earlier what you mentioned, that now if you take even Sanjay Gandhi National Park, I think the studies showed that they had this translocation. They used to capture leopards and go and release, and then the attacks on humans went up. When they stopped that and then permitted the leopards to continue the way they were, and any trouble leopard was taken out actually, whether we like it or not. And then the attacks went down. Because if the leopard starts treating human beings as a party to be wary of, and that continues, I don't think there'll be an issue. The fact that you walk, you take for example, all sorts of places. Before all these areas became national parks, people used to walk about in some of these areas, and there were no, I think in the past, Rian, you would agree, you hardly see a leopard when people go into forests.
Absolutely.
People like Mr. Hoffman and T.H. used to say, so I think it's a question of not being able, not being responsible, ensure that you don't startle the animals, you don't, go around trying to disturb the animals too much. I think it can manage, but of course, it doesn't need to have. Now there's a certain leopard. I saw a photograph where a person has gone close and taken the photograph in Horton Plains. Beautiful photograph, but when you look at the equipment, you have to be so close to that leopard, the male cub, to be able to take that photograph. I think Dr. Inoka mentioned that. So that kind of thing, I think, is better avoided. And also, if there is going to be any situation where a trouble leopard is caught and gone and released in the center of Horton Plains, you can be rest assured that you're going to have problems. So if those kind of wisdom is kept up and the DWC manages it, I mean, the leopards will make their habitat in the sort of estates and so on. In that respect, one aspect that probably one project or one concept that WNPS can really master, Sriyan, in my view, would be select the plantation companies that are conservation oriented. Give them accreditation. You are in that position where you are able to do that, and then make it count why they should protect. There are lots of times that I think lots of people, we go and educate the laborers and so on on the importance of the leopard. But if you ask some of the laborers, in their list of priorities, where does leopard conservation come? It would be right below. What you have to get at is the shareholder. He's the one who decides what the directors would do, and it's the directors that would give the instructions. So if you can create that incentive for those, particularly those entities which are around leopard habitat areas, and give accreditation, that sort of a thing, make it very valuable, charge them for that. I'm sure they are more than willing. Then suddenly you will see that there's greater emphasis, and there'll be much greater benefit for the conservation of game and leopards.
Good stuff. Thank you. So I'm going to take 2-3 quick comments which are coming up in the chats and link them to something I want to ask Inoka, and then I want to open up for the audience here. But I think there was a question around databases, and there's a question on a comment around research. They've listed all the different people who are doing the research and saying, can't we bring all this knowledge together? I think Mara Singh has also made a comment saying DWC has a process for, if researchers feel that they've not had the right hearing or something, they can always appeal. So that's good to know that, people have avenues if somebody is, victimizing them or made a mistake or, something like that. There's always an escalation path created for those things. So that's, I guess, like we have in the country with the judicial process and all of that. But Inoka, I know there's a big project which you're involved in, and it touches on some of what we discussed around databases and WNPS and all of that. So could you elaborate a bit and share some of that, because I don't think most people know about that body of work.
I'll come to that. The concept of the database was actually put forward by Dr. Mittapala long time back. Actually, she started the process of putting together the research that has been done before. But the actual project that Sriyan mentioned is a collaborative project between LOLC, where Kitsiri played a major role in that, and WNPS, bringing back the question that you asked me earlier, whether we are doing enough in terms of scientific work. All our sort of isolated efforts, how are we going to put together to a combined effort to synthesize something that is of conservation value? So all of us were discussing this, and it came to a point where, we thought of the WNPS came up with the project, and LOLC sort of kindly joined in and created a framework where we come up with a multi-regional monitoring network for leopard research. Few objectives, very shortly, to bring together the scientists who are working to share their knowledge on a common database. Translate that knowledge into actions. Work with wildlife department, work with forest, to sort of translate this research work into data or action or information they need to implement conservation. Bring together people, like-minded people from private sector or local communities to work together with these stakeholders. So many objectives, and we initiated this project early this year. The concept came out last year. The project was initiated. To start with, we have 6 centers island-wide in Trinco, in the Denia, with Wildlife Conservation Society, and then in Belihulle, Sigiriya, and Hill Country specifically in Nallatanniya. We have 6 centers, 6 coordinators, and a center coordinator at WNPS. These coordinators would work in together with the scientists, with the local the stakeholders, wildlife department, to understand what is being done, what needs to be done. So that includes active research, working with the others, working with the communities, awareness development, slowly filling the gaps to bring together a set of information that will end up at the end of the day as a central database. But that is not the only outcome. Apart from the central database, there will be a lot of reaching out where we work actively, at the same time create opportunities, because like Sriyan said, there are people out there who want to work. But you have to tell them, what is needed. If you have some money for conservation, you just don't go and dump it somewhere. You use it for a better purpose. And here through this project, we are trying to tell, okay, this is what is needed. These are the hotspots. This is where you should do awareness programs. And if there are scientists working in certain areas, but there are gaps, we would reach out to institutes and say, here, we have a research need here, so just channel your research. Likewise, a lot of objectives. So I think it's the beginning of a very sort of ambitious project to bring together all the knowledge and resources for the conservation of the leopard, in a nutshell.
Thanks. And just to add to that one, I think, it's a multi-year journey, and we'd like more partners. Although some partners have come in, it's more ambitious than what a single partner can support. And, I see some comments on some of these. Yes, we are trying to look at wet centers in the hill country and other things, because the actual issue is that there's been more deaths from snares. It's not a reporting problem. It is actually real increases in the numbers of deaths. So we have some big challenges ahead. I'm just going to stop paying too much attention to the chat and give some love to the people in the room. It's a bit late, but still, let's open up for some questions from the audience here, because I've been taking quite a few from the chat as we conducted the questions. So, audience questions. Yes, we'll have Professor Lakdas there, and the second question over there. Spencer, yeah, one there. And you can either channel it to Rukshan, Inoka, Kitsiri, or just throw it out to us.
Question. WNPS has been clamoring for a long time, asking the Department of Wildlife to come under a suitable ministry. And we have been saying that WNPS has been asking departments like wildlife, forest, environment, and say climate change, oceans, all these should come under one ministry. We are talking about conservation, and the government policy has to be directed towards achieving this. And if there are ministers with conflicting interests, case in point is today, the Ministry of Agriculture is also the minister in charge of wildlife. And the farmers complained about, very recently, last week or so, that monkeys and giant squirrels damage crops. And the ministry immediately said, I'll ask the wildlife to look into this. Wildlife, that's not wildlife mandate to look after these crop damages. That is somebody else's job. Wildlife is to conserve the animal, not to prevent the food of the animals. And so conservation of people, well, now wildlife department is doing more conservation of people. Human-elephant conflict is not on the elephant side, it's on the human side. So I think we have to, again, WNPS must, there's imminent cabinet change, maybe not for long, but whatever, ask for the ministry so that we get ministry, all the departments that are responsible for wildlife conservation, climate change, all that to come under one ministry. Thank you.
Okay, point noted. I think whether that will happen, whether we'll have that enlightenment or not, question will remain. We'll certainly keep knocking at the door. I know we've had that, we are seeing it in conservation, but if you look at the people who've been holding the position of Ministry of Finance and things like that, you'll also find that there have been lots of ministers having conflicting ministries under them. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Next question here, please keep your questions a bit shorter. Or comments?
I'll keep it very short. So I think in the discussion we spoke about finances being a key part of it in terms of economic value. So my question in short would be, is doing research on how many leopards actually supporting conservation? Or is it doing research on actually where do foreigners, where do locals go travel, what sort of economic value happens from the travels, looking at that aspect and coming up with that financial value of it, and then using those means to work with government institutions or whatever, because like what you very rightly said, I don't think a governing body should be constantly trying to support like what you all just did in Noor earlier, where you all supported the house. It should be the country, the government. So should that be a means of research on those financial areas and then support? Or is this the area that you think you should go? It's to anyone in the panel.
I'll take it now. My belief is that it should happen simultaneously. You can't do one thing and wait for the other. While somebody is looking at the tourism sector and finances and how that should work, there should be another person at the same time, because we can't wait for one thing to finish. So, but you touched a very good aspect. We didn't talk about the fine economic aspects and researching on that, which is definitely necessary. Even the ecosystem valuation process, we need better mechanism, better studies to understand. So all these things should come or happen at the same time, I would believe.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if I were to add, I think, when COVID hit, businesses didn't sit back saying transportation is the problem for government and all of that and say, until you solve my problem, I won't do anything. You took initiative. You feel that it's yours, you want to solve it as best as you can until something else comes. So I think if we believe that conservation is our country, our resources, and we love wildlife, we had better stand up and do more rather than keep only asking the question and throwing the ball while trying to influence, because those wheels turn much slower than we'd like it, unfortunately. So I guess we'll have to do more. That would be my ask from everyone. Okay, next question is from where? Question? Question? Okay, there's a question there, and there's a question there, so two questions there.
Regarding the databases, I just want to know, because I've heard about data stealing, not really, but when it comes to publishing and things like that. So is it realistic to actually think that databases, like you talked about, public databases where people are uploading things for research purposes, and then after that people publishing on that? Because I know there's a lot of hesitancy from people within certain fields putting things up. So I just want to know your thoughts on that.
I think as a non-participant in that field, my comment as an outside person, yes, I've seen this myopic view where researchers and academia and people say this is all about me and somebody will take my data and all of that. But maybe that's the very reason that we are not progressing the way we should be as a country. That while there is a need for unique research, the more we share and interact and, fill in the gaps of the presence, absence, and what's going on, and how can we compare the behavior you saw here and there, I think that enlightened state will probably benefit all of us as a broader ecosystem much faster. So we as WNPS are encouraging a lot more of that behavior. It's up to the people who are, enlightened and willing to share to join the party. So we are certainly trying to get it going.
My question is with regard to the Highland leopard that has been grabbing quite a bit of attention recently. Is that because we've been seeing a couple of videos being circulated around recently in terms of a lot of sightings? Is that because of habitat deterioration that we're seeing a lot of sightings, or is it just media hype, or are people getting too up and close with the leopard? Just your thoughts on that. Thank you.
So the lady who works more with the hill country folks, you're in the best position. I'll take one more question from this half of the audience. Yeah.
The occurrence in hill country is actually primarily because of habitat disturbance. They have to cross to go from one forest patch to another. Now that we have created patches, they have to cross plantations or human habitats. So the more we eat into large chunks of forest, the more we eat into the areas where they move through, you have to sort of accept the fact that you are going to see more and more leopards. So the recent incident is one of many, many incidents that we are seeing pretty much every day. So if that answers your question, one of the major primary threats to the leopard is habitat destruction, especially in the hill country, poor land use management. It's a very sensitive landscape that should be dealt with utmost care, which we are not doing.
I'll talk to you on what we are doing with plant at the end of this question.
India, we have seen 1972, Project Leopard has drafted. People thought that it is basically impossible to do.
Project Tiger?
Project Tiger, yeah. Project Tiger, sorry. The person who actually initiated the Project Tiger has worked here in Sri Lanka also for 4 years under Jeff, Dr. Panwa. But they have seen the results after 40 years, 4 decades. That's a long time. Of course, working with the large carnivores, that's a story. Can we all get together and prepare a very ambitious project like that, at least looking at 20 years down the road, every 3 years or 5 years with the revision probability, that sort of thing, with the research that flowing into the field. So I think that's the only way to look at the large carnivore conservation program. That will add a lot of value to the system. One thing that in Sri Lankan conservation is missing is the town and country planning. That we are not bringing town and country planners into the scene. That is why we have a land use issue. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very, very valuable comment. And that's what we are actually trying to do now. Through this project that I just mentioned, we are creating a platform. This is just the structure. I mean, we have started something ambitious. It's a trial for us too. But somebody has to start somewhere. So we have created this platform and inviting people. So eventually, like you said, once we get a substantial number of people to work with us, yes, we can go ahead and try. I can't promise anything, but we need to do something.
So I think one missing component was possibly there was a whole enlightened view from the government and the policymakers and people to also complement that plan. And you need that. So if not, I think all the researchers, all the companies, WNPS, all of that, there's only so far we can go. So please keep lobbying, talking to the politicians and influencers that you know to try to figure this out better. Because the one thing Dr. Sriani talks about is, for God's sake, don't let the leopard conservation go down the elephant conservation path. We can see what a mess that has become. So let's all hopefully, aspire for something better, work hard. But I think my ask as WNPS to kind of start wrapping up is, we need more from everyone. We've seen that there is a lot to do on wildcat and leopard conservation, and we see that there is very little actually being done. There's a lot of talk, a lot of hype, and far less action. So we'd like and encourage everyone to kind of get on board, do something positive a lot more. I mean, today people will spend 50,000-75,000 rupees to go on a trip for wildlife sightings, and they'll do 6-7 trips, 10 trips a year. What if you give one trip equivalent for conservation also? If 10 of you did that, we could give DWC another cage and help them conserve and save another few lives. So we could, so there is a lot that both the individuals, the companies, the researchers by collaborating, the policymakers, and all of that could do. And in our own way, let's also help the DWC, but also pressurize the DWC, ask the right questions, work. It's a give and take kind of approach. We are going to be challenging them, we'll be taking them to court, but we'll also partnering them, supporting them. I think there's no other way that we'll have to work. These are the realities that we have to work with. But just to conclude, plant is one of the big conservation initiatives the WNPS has started on encouraging and growing the notion of private conservation in the country. And as part of that, we are talking to a number of the plantation companies to try to widen the forest corridors within their plantations to see if you could create actually corridors which link patches across their estates. And, so there's work that we are starting, but, we are thinking of that as a 30-year journey. We are not starting that as a 3-year plan. And, I think step by step, like Vimukti said, Tiger, we are seeing success 40 years. Somewhere in the middle, the project Tiger was receiving a lot of criticism and the project went up and down. So I think, we should live in hope. There's a lot to hope for, there's a lot to fight for. So just to conclude, I'm going to give each of the 3 panelists a 30-45 second wrap-up slot to give some closing comments. Rukshan, you want to start?
While collaboration among the conservation community, researchers coming to some common platform is very good. It is also excellent if the leopard can have, like Vimukti mentioned, like Project Tiger, a special kind of national level project dedicated to the conservation of the leopard. I would also like to see greater professionalism from the wildlife department. I'd like to reiterate that I'm really not talking about the rank and file and the mid-level management, but often I see there's something very wrong about the hierarchical structure and the people who end up at the top. Yes, I understand what Sriyan says, that politicians are equally responsible, but sometimes it is a bad partnership between a bad politician, a bad minister, and a bad head of department. So somehow the checks and balances for good performance in that capacity doesn't seem to be there. And someone who underperforms or actually does things that are not necessarily salutary to wildlife and conservation can survive long term in that post. So I'd like to see those things change. I mean, it's you can say it's like a wish list, but unfortunately, until those things change, I think conservation will find it hard going, because if there is a block at a critical juncture and it's at a point where you actually want to see
10 seconds more.
Okay, want to see change and it doesn't happen, I think we can do a lot of things at a lower level and at a less powerful at less powerful junctures and not get the results that are required. Thank you.
Kithri? I'm saving the lady for the last.
Well, one aspect that is prevalent and that is important in the country, as even though we did not speak about, is the dire financial crisis that we are going through. I don't want to sound like a prophet of doom, but what is expected is that in the 6 months to 1 year, there will be large number of small and medium companies that will close down. People will lose jobs and so on and so forth. So it's a bit of a. So now, my friends, I'm telling you, I'm appealing to you. Now is the time that if you enjoy the wilds, if you understand the importance of having the ecological systems, forests and so on, without waiting for the government to come about and do something, without having that impression that, look, it's a government who should do, that we as individuals, we as corporate should step out, come out and do something. I don't think there was ever a need in Sri Lanka for people who matter like you and, all of you. All of you came and spent your almost 1.5 hours here because you believe and you love nature, you love the wilds, you understand the importance of having a green Sri Lanka. So this is the time that all of us will have to put our efforts, force the companies that we work to be more proficient, more responsible in terms of doing our bit and doing it generously as much as we can. Because otherwise, we can prophesize, we can talk all these nice things, but my dear friends, if the jeep drivers in Yala and Wilpattu, if they don't have their livelihood, if people living in those areas, if they lose their jobs and if they are not able to provide food for their kith and kin, their families, conservation would be a activity that would be rather low priority. So many of you are influential people, many of you are people who are enjoying opinion leadership in society. Many of us are people who are working for corporates that are making loads of profits and who are able to support. And I'm telling you, I'm repeating myself again, there was never a time as important as this in Sri Lanka. If we want our kids in the future to be able to go to Horton Plains or Wilpattu or Yala, Now is the time that we need to act. And if we don't, it will be something which is in the past. We may have to look at our images and think that, look, we used to have some of these creatures. So just the passing remark is that I think you take this to your heart, because it's going to get tough. And when it gets tough, these areas like conservation and environment are the first things that will suffer. And you can be rest assured with our lot in Parliament, that is something that is going to be inevitable. So therefore, it's time for us, and believe me, we can make that change. We sincerely can make that change and ensure that there will be, greater part of our environment is preserved by the time we come out of this crisis.
Okay.
Okay. So two things, what I would like to say. One is that we are talking about mistakes. We don't want the leopard to go the same way that the elephant is going. Yes. So in that case, what are the things that we are doing correctly? If we are making a correct decision, if we are doing an activity that is helpful for conservation, help that. Step in. Like it's said, step in and do what you can. If you are making a mistake, rather than pointing a finger, see if you can help to sort of correct that. If it might not be you, but some other party, and there might be a reason. See if that can be corrected. That's very important. And the other thing is, there are people who are willing to engage in conservation, but they might not be scientists, or they might not be conservationists, they might not know what to do, private sector perhaps. So in that case, we need to define, or else all of us will end up in our little corners doing little things that will not add up to anything positive. So somebody has to define activities and tell, okay, correct things, correct decisions, validated ones, and tell, okay, this is where we need help, and step in. Am I allowed to make a personal comment?
They're all personal comments.
Right. Now I'm not talking as a scientist, I'm talking as an individual. Few years back, I had a choice of buying a car. I don't have a car yet. I used that money to buy a little piece of land that is between a protected area and a hillock, a small piece of land. Today I have the joy of seeing a leopard mother and a cub walking through that. If not, that land would have been mined, ended up destroyed. A little tiny thing in a little landscape, but for me, it made all the difference to that mother and the cub. It made all the difference to me. If you have funding, invest in something that would leave lasting impacts. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, personal note.
Lovely note to end on, so I don't want to damage that feeling. But if you want to do that kind of thing on scale, that is what WNPS is doing today with plant and some other work. So there are no more than 4 to 5 companies who are even remotely funding leopard work in the country. You should know that. So when you're talking of conservation, there isn't really much conservation on leopards going on. So number of you can help us to help you, so that we can all think of similar environments for our kids. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining, and my humble thanks to the panel. Some great discussion, some great debate. I think all 4 of us will probably not agree on all the comments we all made, but that's the beauty of having a panel, to bring diverse opinions and views to the table. Thank you for some great questions. I'm sorry we couldn't take all the questions on the chat, but hope you had an enlightened evening. Thank you very much, and see you next month. Good night.